Hey, hey. Uh, this photo has been going around quite a bit. This is going to be about the comparison between the fall of Saigon and Afghanistan. Kabul, I think is how it's pronounced. Um, and I need to apologize to those involved with the fall of Saigon and the evacuation of our troops and allies. Um, it does. I did some research, and it dishonors those in Vietnam severely, trying to compare them with what happened in Afghanistan the last day or two. And I'm sorry. Vietnam was a little before my time. I had to look it up. I think I was 4 when the Vietnam War ended. Don't post this anymore. Okay. Like I said, I had to look it up here. The final evacuation. This is a cool article. It's short. I'll read the whole thing. I think it's worth sharing. The final evacuation of Saigon. This is written by Kate Kelly. Final evacuation of Saigon signaled by the song White Christmas. See, I didn't know about this. In April of '75, almost 20 years after almost 20 years fighting in Vietnam, kind of like in Afghanistan, I believe Afghanistan was 21, the United States finally pulled out. That winter, the North Vietnamese pushed the South Vietnamese back forcibly and definitively. The Americans knew it was over. They needed to pull out about 1,000 Americans, many of them civilians, and 6,000 at-risk Vietnamese who would suffer if they were left behind. In preparation for the expected evacuation, the American Embassy distributed a 15-page booklet called SAFE, standing for Standard Instruction and Advice to Civilians in an Emergency. A map with the booklet indicated the assembly areas where helicopters would be able to land and pick people up. I heard on the radio this morning there was about 31 different places. See, I grew up, I just was familiar with that last photo of the helicopter, and I'd always heard that they had only started evacuating people from the embassy. They did evacuate people from the embassy. That was the last safe place to evacuate from. They were evacuating people all over the city of Saigon before the Viet Cong tanks came crashing through their gates. And they were organized, obviously. They had handed out a literature to explain. A map with the booklet, back to the article, the map within the booklet indicated the assembly areas where helicopters were able to land and pick people up. An insert in the page read, "Note evacuational signal. Do not disclose to other personnel. When the evacuation is ordered, the code will be read on Armed Forces radio. The code is," quote, is that a quote? If it's from, anyway. The code is, "The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising. This will be followed by the playing of I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas." This is April, I believe. Nowhere near December. Back to the article. Those who were not U.S. citizens but expected to participate in the evacuation contacted Americans they knew and asked them to sing the tune, yet they feared they might not recognize it. Operation Frequent Wind. Throughout April, the United States reduced the number of people. Yet, throughout April, see, they planned ahead of time. President Biden and woke generals. Throughout April, The United States reduced the number of people and the equipment in Vietnam. Then, on April 28th, 1975, then President Gerald Ford, the order from Ford arrived. This launched Operation Frequent Wind, the term used for the final evacuation. See, they had started getting equipment together and out and started evacuating people out before the final evacuation. The coded message went out. The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising, and then the wistful strains of White Christmas played on the radio. I believe I heard it was Bing Crosby's rendition. And my glasses are filthy. Let me get rid of them. In 19 hours, 81 helicopters carried approximately 7,000 people to aircraft carriers offshore. The helicopters used for carrying passengers were CH-46 and CH-53s. U.S. troops on the ground protected the landing zones, the LZs. As people arrived, they were grouped for incoming aircraft. Tom Benton, a Marine CH-53 crew chief for the operation, said in an email, as the hours went by and the LZs were taking more incoming fire, everybody knew the evacuation was going to have to end at some point. We allowed more and more people per flight. It was orderly, but the aircraft was packed. During the final hours of Operation Frequent Wind, 4 military personnel were killed. 2 Marine security guards on the ground, Charles McMahon and Darwin Judge, died in a rocket attack at Tan Son Nhut Airport, sorry for butchering that name, airport during the evacuation. In addition, one C-46 helicopter from Her Majesty's, I think that's British, HMM 164 crashed in the sea and 2 CH-46 pilots were killed. The 2 pilots were Marine Captain Bill Neistel and Marine First Lieutenant Michael Shea. 2 other crew members in the crash survived. The YT-14 was the last helicopter lost during the Vietnam War. At 7:45 a.m. on April 30th, the last helicopter lifted off the roof of the embassy and headed out to sea. Later that morning, North Vietnamese tanks crashed to the gates of the presidential palace. And this is a really neat little addendum. Like I said, I'm not much of a Vietnam War historian. I know a little bit about World War I and II, and that's really about it when it comes to the big wars. In June of 2021, I had a response from the above article from Vietnam veteran Ken Benham. Benham pointed out that I left out much of the story of Frequent Wind as Saigon fell. In addition to the helicopter evacuations, there were many U.S. naval ships in the waters outside of Saigon. Some were there to receive the passengers evacuated by helicopter. Others were there to pick up the frantic refugees paddling out and anything that would float. Benham was stationed aboard the USS Durham, LKA-114. Prior to the ship's arrival near Vietnam, the Durham was in port at Subic Bay in the Philippines. They did some planning to get their people out. The crew was told they were on their way to Vietnam. Saigon was about to fall, and ships were needed to help evacuate Americans as well as Vietnamese refugees. The plan was that some of the waiting ships receive helicopter evacuees, others awaited those arriving by water. From there, the people would be taken by ship to a safe port. The USS Durham was to pick up people coming to the ship by water. Everything was so chaotic that some Vietnamese helicopter pilots landed on the deck of the Durham if there was an open area. Like other ships, the Durham ran out of room for helicopters. The choppers were then stripped of parts and then pushed overboard to make room for more people. Benham describes one Vietnamese pilot who took matters into his own hands to move out the helicopters. Quote, he took each chopper up and programmed it to fly on without him, autopilot, setting it so that it would crash into the water far away. The pilot then would jump out of the copter, and friends picked him up by boat, returning him to the Durham. He did this at least 5 times. Ballsy guy, man. Benham describes many memorable moments. He remembers a 70-year-old man who paddled the full 6 miles out to the Durham in a round reed boat. A reed boat, I believe, is just plants. Another woman arrived with 9 children, only 4 of whom were hers, and a little girl slipped overboard in the chaos of getting her on board. One of the Durham's crewmen jumped in and rescued her. Over the course of the day, the crew of the Durham helped at least 4,500 refugees to get on board the ship. They were searched for weapons and contraband and then escorted to a cargo hold where they were fed and shown to bathrooms. The crewmen did everything they could to make them feel at ease. As darkness fell, the ship was ordered to leave the area. They were to deliver their people to other ships that would take them to safe ports. While 4,500 people were saved by the actions of the men of the Durham that day, Benham still regrets that he could not do more. Even today, he still thinks of them. Quote, "How many were left behind? Why weren't we able to go pick up more? It still haunts me." And his plea to me was, "Please tell my full story." In addition to including some of Benham's description of that day, I wanted to get a sense of how he felt overall. He had positive things to say. Quote, "I never had to fire my gun in anger, and it helped save 4,500 people. It made my military service worthwhile," end quote. Good man. And when asked about the USS Durham, he had many fond memories of the much-honored ship, and he said it perfectly. Quote, "We didn't love her because she was a great ship. She was a great ship because we loved her." Thank you, Ken, for getting in touch with me and sharing your story. I was trying to find a total total number of evacuees that we got out of Saigon that day, and the closest I could come up with is Wikipedia, which is always dicey, but we'll go with it. It says Marine pilots accumulated 1,054 flight hours and flew 682 sorties throughout Operation Frequent Wind. And see, this doesn't even include the ships, the 4,500 from the Durham alone, and the Durham was not the only ship helping out. Evacuating 5,000 from the Tan Son Nhut, the airport, 878 U.S. and 1,120 Vietnamese and third country nationals from the embassy. That was just the embassy alone. There are other sites. And unfortunately, some 400 evacuees were left behind at the embassy, including over 100 South Korean citizens. Do not post this anymore. I'm actually deleting it because it pissed me off once I did some research that I dishonored the hardworking people, the brave men and women that got our people and our allies out of Saigon. Let's talk about Afghanistan real quick here. Reports over the radio all day were talking about the chaos ensuing, people getting beaten, trying to scramble to get out of Afghanistan. One report talked about how the runway strips at the airport were littered with human feces. There are no bathrooms out there. Nobody has any water. They're dehydrating and they're going hungry out there too. Get our people out of there. I was galled to hear a State Department official, I believe. He was asked, the reporters are actually doing their job. It took a travesty. It took such a cluster of an event like this for the journalists to actually start doing their job. And a reporter asked, can we get everybody out? And this State Department official said, we don't have the capabilities of doing that. Bullshit. You did it back in 75. You can do it today. You did it back then. You should be able to do 10 times the amount. They did it with boats and helicopters. We have even better equipment and better tech now than we did back in 75. Whoever's accountable for this, Biden, State Department, Secretary of the State Department, the Pentagon, whoever, they need to be held accountable. Heads need to roll over this. This is bullshit. So there.